Welcome to my video about the 1967 Jungle Book movie, my thoughts after rewatching it. Advanced warning, this video could be a bit of a disaster. I've got a lot of thoughts on this movie, and they're of the scattered and random variety, so this could be a long and rambling video in which I just follow a bunch of random thoughts, and it probably will be. Fair warning. I am going to at least try to go quickly. So that it doesn't become any more drawn out than it needs to. I say try, no promises. Sometimes I find myself searching for words, lose my train of thought. If you watch this channel, you're no doubt familiar. But first of all, what is this? What is this video? So this is an outgrowth of something I've been doing on my blog for years. On my blog, ever since 2006, I've had this project where I review all the new movies I see. Meaning new to me. Like if I see a movie for the first time, I write a review on it. For years, I resisted writing reviews about movies I would be seeing for the 20th time. You know, movies I was very familiar with and I was rewatching. For a few reasons, but the primary reason was just it took too much time. I mean, it took enough of my time trying to keep up with writing a review of every new movie I saw. I didn't want to add in rewatching movies. Plus, movies I rewatched by definition tends to be movies that I have lots of thoughts on. You know, because I've had years to think about them and I have histories with them and stuff like that. So you'd end up with these monster reviews, and I couldn't be bothered with it. But since I've gotten more involved with video reviewing, I've come to appreciate how much easier it is, to video something rather than write something. Now, granted, that's because I do this at the lowest possible level. I just turn on the camera and ramble and don't edit and don't script and anything like that. But yeah, you know, even if I ramble for a half hour or an hour, it still is less time than it would take me to write something, right? Because if you write something, you actually have to think about what you're writing. So anyways, that's the origin behind this project. I haven't posted any videos in this project for, I don't know, a year, a couple years now. And that's largely because I've been busy working a couple different jobs, but even more importantly, I've got a 3-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old baby. And that will cut into anyone's free time to watch a lot of movies. That plus, I don't really have access to a lot of movies. We're out in Vietnam. We don't have any cable. We don't have Netflix or Disney Plus or anything. We don't have a DVD player. I don't even know where I would see new movies. So that's the purpose behind this project. Sorry, that's the origin behind this project. So having just said that I don't watch a lot of new movies, I did actually find myself watching The Jungle Book again this afternoon. I came home from work a little bit early because my wife was out, so I had to pick my daughter up from preschool. And then I was taking care of her by myself for a few hours while the wife was out. So we took her to the playground, we played, we came back. I was just feeling exhausted after work in the playground. And I just thought, let's turn on the TV and watch some videos. Which is kind of a lazy parent thing to do. Although I think back and actually, you know, we used to love it when my dad would take care of us instead of my mom, because dad used to always let us watch all the TV. Mom wouldn't let us watch. You know, back at the time, I thought it was because dad was cool, but I think that's a dad thing to do, isn't it? Dads just get tired and turn on the TV. Maybe I'm making excuses for my bad parenting. Now, we actually don't have a TV as such. I mean, we have a TV, but it's not connected to any broadcast television stations. It's a smart TV, so it's hooked up to YouTube. We don't have any subscriptions. Now, I happen to know from experience meaning somebody who spends too much time on YouTube, that a lot of the old Disney animated movies are uploaded on YouTube, full movies in decent quality. I don't know why Disney hasn't cracked down harder on this with the copyright. Because the newer Disney movies, and by newer I guess I mean anything after 1990, they seem to be very vigilant about removing. I don't think you'd find a lot of full copies of those on YouTube's. But the older movies get uploaded onto YouTube quite often. Now, they don't stay up forever, although I've known some copies to stay up for 2 or 3 years before the copyright police finally found it. But they should have computers and everything doing this, right? I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the older Disney movies, animated movies, are fairly easy to find on YouTube. So, put on the Jungle Book. I was hoping that my daughter would watch it with me. She actually had very little interest in it. Although she was playing with some of her toys and she was watching it intermittently. I think having it on in the background helped her keep her somewhat occupied. When I don't remember much about when I was 3.5, I guess, to be fair, but certainly when I was around that age, 4 or 5 or something, I was just completely fascinated by those Disney cartoons. In a way that she doesn't seem to be. And my theory is that kids these days are just exposed to so much media that it's not as unique as it was when we were kids. I don't know. Anyways, my history with the Jungle Book. I was largely raised on Disney cartoons. Disney in general. So when I was a child, we had the collection of the picture books that used to go with those miniature records. The ones that had the chime, and every time you heard the chime, you turn the page. And there was a whole bunch of these which would go with the Disney animated movies. They would include the songs on them. They would include the little picture book with them. And so we listened to them. We sang the song, and that was how I was familiar with it, primarily through those picture books. And this is another thing that's showing my age, because those things do not exist anymore, right? I mean, obviously they don't exist anymore because nobody has records anymore. But it would be relatively easy to upgrade the technology and put it on CD or something like that. But following along with a book and an audio, do kids still do that? I think this is another thing that, even though it technically could exist nowadays, it just doesn't, because there are so many other things that compete with kids' attention. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if it still exists. The Jungle Book was one of the first movies I ever saw in theaters. It wasn't the first one. The first movie I ever saw in theaters was Bambi, but Jungle Book was one of the first. This was for the re-release during the 80s. I was already familiar with the story from that picture book and record, but my mom took me to see the movie. I remember this is one of those early childhood memories. When Baloo gets to the Bare Necessities song, I started singing along with it. And my mother just kind of panicked a little bit. She was like, and quickly covered up my mouth. And I was like, what? And my mom said, you can't sing in the movie theater. And I was like, what? Why not? And she's like, well, some people just like to listen to the movie without hearing other people sing. And that was a learning experience for me. I already knew all the songs because of the records, you see. Now, this is another thing that's going to show my age. Back in those days, Disney restricted access to their animated movies. I think they've completely given up doing that nowadays, right? Because of all the media out there. But they'd have these movies. Well, most of the Disney animated movies, you never see them on TV. They'd never be shown. It was largely before VHS. But even after VHS came out, they were restricted which ones they were releasing. When these movies came back into theaters, it was like they were being released for the first time. And if your target audience is children, then you don't have to wait too many years before that completely turns over. So I think it was originally released in theaters in 1967, and then it was just in the Disney Vault, and nobody saw it again until it got released in the early 80s, where it was completely new to a new generation. Um, and even people old enough to have seen it in 1967 will have completely forgotten about it. And they were able to market it like a big summer blockbuster, just like a new release. The advertisements would be in the papers, and then it would go back in the vault, and it was impossible to see again. And that kind of thing, especially in the mind of a child, tends to kind of it looms very big in your mind. So I was always thinking about it, like, I remember that Jungle Book movie I saw way back when I was a little kid. That movie was so cool. I'd love to see it again. And then it got another theatrical release, I believe in 1990. I was adolescent at this time, not quite a teenager. Went with my cousins, I remember, to see this movie. My cousins had never seen it before, and I was like, oh, it's a great movie. And I remember, again, this is one of those random memories. The opening scenes of that movie, where the credits are playing, and there are these animated scenes of the jungle. And my cousin said, "Is this movie animated? It looks real." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I was a big Disney shill at that point, so I said, well, it's just because of the high quality of Disney animation." I was my parents were very conservative, so I wasn't allowed to watch normal TV. The He-Man and the Transformers and all this other stuff that most normal people my age grew up on, the Knight Rider and A-Team and Miami Vice and all that stuff on the 80s. I wasn't allowed to watch it. We could watch the Disney Channel, and we could watch PBS at my house. So I grew up on the Disney media. I can't blame this entirely on my parents. I was, for whatever reason, predisposed to really get into this stuff. So I was really into it as a child, and I retained that fondness for Disney even into my early teens, where I was a big Disney fan. Okay, sorry. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so that was one of the reasons I really loved the Jungle Book. Then it did eventually get released on home video. I don't remember, sometime in the early '90s, and then I watched it multiple times over on home video. I was nearing my teens by that time, but still a big Disney fan. Um, I've also used it more recently, within the past 5 years or so, in my classroom. And I'll link to the materials that I used down in the description down below. This was, I don't show a lot of movies in the classroom nowadays, but this was when I was on a big kick of showing movies in the classroom, because there's research about the benefits of a lot of input in the language classroom and stuff like that. It was this phase I went through in my teaching, and used the Jungle Book as one of the movies I showed in my classroom. This is one of the reasons I know that there's always free copies of these movies on YouTube all the time. Use the YouTube a copy of the movie on YouTube to get me through it. Broke it into, like, I don't know, 20 parts or whatever, and showed it in very 5-minute increments to the class, and I had whole worksheets designed around it. And in the process of designing these worksheets and using them in the classroom, I watched the movie over and over again, like, a couple times with my headphones on, designing the worksheets, and then a couple times playing it in the classroom. I actually used the same worksheets across 3 or 4 different classrooms. So I got good use out of these worksheets back in the day. So just was really watching this movie over and over again, to the point where I had it, like, memorized. That was 5 or so years ago now. I don't quite have it. It's faded in the memory since then a little bit. I mean, or it had until I just rewatched it this afternoon. But that's how well. I mean, I knew this movie inside and out during those days. I've also, as somebody who spends way too much time online, uh, spent some time acquiring bits and pieces of trivia about this movie. And yeah, there are all little bits of trivia about it. I guess maybe one of the most famous ones. Well, it was Walt Disney's last movie, so there's that. He died halfway through producing it. Um, it's of course based on the Jungle Book. Apologies, this is going to show up in mirror image on the video. This is my copy of the Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. And I actually read this book in middle school, but I'll talk about this on another day. The reason I don't want to talk too much about the book is because the book and the movie have very little in common. Disney, well, I shouldn't say very little. You can definitely see some of the story beats were inspired by the book, not to mention the characters. But the book's completely different. The whole bunch of stuff happens in the book that doesn't happen in the movie, and vice versa. Book's much darker. The characters are much different. Disney famously, I think famously, when they were starting the project, he gave a copy of the Jungle Book to his story writers. He said, "This is Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book. The first thing I want you to do is not to read it." Apparently, that's what Disney said. So they were taking the inspiration of the not funny. They were taking the inspiration of the animals. I shouldn't say funny because they're not funny animals in the book, although they are in the movie. Taking the inspiration of the animals, but the tone and everything completely different from the book. Another very famous piece of trivia is that the Beatles at one time were supposed to be involved with this movie. The vultures who show up at the end were the Beatles. This is one of those things. It depends which website you look at. Some websites make it sound like they were completely signed up and it was just like a last minute scheduling conflict. Some websites make it sound like it was just this idea that got floated at one point, but it was never taken very seriously. But one way or the other, there was some idea at some point that the Beatles were going to voice the vultures. It didn't work out, either for scheduling or because John Lennon didn't want to do it or something, depending on again what website you read. Excuse me. I was a huge Beatles fan in my 20s. But having said that, I think it's for the best that the Beatles didn't do this movie. It's one of those classics, what might have been moments, right? Because you think about how popular the Beatles were at the time, and you think about how even since their time, they're unlike a lot of their contemporaries, their legend and mystique has just grown over time, I think. So I wonder how the Jungle Book would be regarded nowadays if the Beatles were in it. But the Beatles at that point in their career could be a bit prickly and hard to work with, I think. And I say this as somebody who was once a big fan. They weren't always the greatest actors. So the fact that they got rid of, that they never had the Beatles and they got professional actors to do it is probably for the best. Oh, sorry, I say professional actors, but according to Wikipedia, there was I think one guy from the British invasion, who Chad and Jeremy, or Jeremy of Chad and Jeremy. It's all on Wikipedia. All this trivia is all on Wikipedia. Uh, so yeah, the vultures are not the Beatles, but they're kind of Beatles-esque. They've got Liverpool type accents. Not well, actually, not all four of them. A couple of them seem to have those accents, and then they sing a kind of Beatles-esque song about the importance of friendship. Um, the other random bits of trivia here. The guy who played Shere Khan, George Sanders, I discovered a few years back, was I think popular in Britain. I say this because I've been living abroad and working with British colleagues. And I remember a couple of them were talking about George Sanders and how he was so great. He I think he had a reputation in Britain for being a famous character actor for villains. He would play upper class British, like aristocratic villains. And I found out in the same conversation that he actually died, I think not long after The Jungle Book was released, by suicide, and wrote a note saying something like, "I'm sorry to leave you, but life, it's all such a bore." Uh, but he's someone who I get the impression is a bit of a legend in Britain, or maybe a bit of a figure, cult figure in the sense of like cult classic. You know what I mean. And I've got to say, since I found that out, I've enjoyed Shere Khan scenes so much more because I'm now looking for that that little performance where it's so British and so polite, but at the same time just a little tinge of menace behind it. That scene where Shere Khan is talking to Kaa is just such a classic example, and I think that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, even though that whole scene is completely superfluous. Like, it's the kind of thing that I think if they were making it nowadays, it would just completely cut it off, cut it out. But the way Shere Khan is being so polite and at the same time so menacing. I mean, to a lesser extent, the confrontation with Mowgli, but Shere Khan really does not get a lot of screen time in the Jungle Book. He doesn't even really show up until the very end. So he just has a couple of scenes, but that one with Kaa was really good. And then the guy that gets to do Baloo, Phil Harris, is this is another one of those random bits of trivia. According to Wikipedia, Walt Disney just met him at a party and was really impressed with him. He had a career at Disney Studios. He goes on to play almost the exact same character in the Robin Hood animated movie, where he plays Little John, but like the bear version of Little John, who is almost essentially like Baloo under just a different name. And then Disney used him again for their next movie, where he plays Thomas O'Malley, the alley cat in the Aristocats, which is again almost the same character. He's not doing a bear this time, and I think by that third performance, it's getting a little bit tired. As a kid, I never put it together that it was the same actor doing all three of those movies. Well, of course, now you have Wikipedia, so it's a lot easier to connect the dots. But even without Wikipedia, as an adult watching these movies, I'm like, that is Baloo. Connect them together. I mean, the other reason it was hard to make these connections as a kid is, like I said earlier, because Disney used to keep these movies in the vault back in those days. Which actually, while I'm on the subject, brings me to another point, another little bit of internet trivia that makes the rounds, is that the animation got reused. The scene where Mowgli's getting greeted by the wolves is from The Sword in the Stone, where Arthur's getting greeted by his dogs. The scene with the fighting the monkeys, or the chase with the monkeys, is from the Disney Wind in the Willows. The Disney didn't call it the Wind in the Willows; they called it the Adventures of Mr. Toad. And then I think some of the scenes from the Jungle Book would later go on to get reused in the Robin Hood movie. Now, when I say animation gets reused, I don't really know what that means, to be honest. I mean, the characters are kind of in the same positions. And I guess they just animate new characters over them. And I guess this saves them work because they don't have to think about the movement or something. I mean, obviously, the exact same animation is not reused because it's different characters, but there's something going on there. And while I'm on the subject of the animation, I guess I may as well talk about another bit of trivia I did not appreciate as a kid, which is that this is during Disney's cheap period. So Disney, during their golden age, spent lavish amounts of money on animation and just had everything hand drawn. I'm thinking of from Snow White. Dumbo got done on the cheap, but Pinocchio, the Peter Pan, the 1953 Peter Pan, and I think the last movie was Sleeping Beauty. And then Sleeping Beauty did not perform well at the box office, and that was the one that kind of broke the animation department. And so everything else was done using a cheaper process. And again, I'm not going to be able to talk about this intelligently because I don't understand the mechanics of animation. But it was something where they would sketch the characters in pencil or something, and then transfer them on to the background. That's not right because they were using pre-painted backgrounds even during Disney's classic days. But something about the transfer was done using a bit of a newer, cheaper technology. I think it's much more visible with 101 Dalmatians, which was one of the first movies to do this. With the Jungle Book, again, this is something I never noticed until it got pointed out to me. But you can kind of see the lines of the characters, where it looks like there's a little bit of like you can see where the characters don't really mesh with their backgrounds, where it looks like you can kind of see the pencils around them. I think I've heard people describe this as like pencil drawn animation, and then I don't think that the animation would fully come back until, I don't know, the computer technology, or I mean, I don't know. Don Bluth was a factor here as well, right? This was one of the reasons why Don Bluth led his walkout of Disney animators in the 80s, because he was so frustrated about the way they were animating cheaply. I mean, that being said, you compare it to the other animated stuff that was around in the 60s. That old Spider-Man cartoon from the late 60s where nobody is moving. It's just a bunch of freeze frames. So I guess everything has to be compared to what was common during the era. But yeah, I mean, I said at the beginning of this review, my cousin had been so impressed by the beautiful animation of the Jungle Book, and I too, as a kid, was really impressed by it. But it's interesting to know that this was done during Disney's cheap period. Although I don't think that applies to the backgrounds. I think that just only applies to the characters moving around. Oh, right. Sorry. I was talking about Phil Harris. Jumping back to something. He was, as far as I could tell, not really famous for much else. I mean, I've gone to his Wikipedia page, and he did a lot. He was in radio shows and TV shows, and a musician, and he had some sort of hit song back in the day and stuff like that. But I, I at one point I searched for him on YouTube to kind of see what videos of him would pop up, and there's not much. Um, I mean, granted, the farther back you go in time, the more difficult it is to find YouTube clips in general. But there don't seem to be many clips of him on TV from those days. I think I saw him in a talk show or something like that, but it wasn't. Which is odd in a way because as Baloo, he is just bursting with personality. You watch that movie and you listen to that voice acting performance, and you think that this is a larger than life guy. This is somebody who's just always the life of the party, always. And he went on to play that same character in as Little John and Robin Hood and Thomas O'Malley and the Aristocats. And yeah, I mean, I guess it just shows the value of casting relatively unknowns as voice actors in animated movies. And, the problem with casting big name stars in these parts. And I don't want to talk about the 2016 live action remake too much, but I think this is a point that has to be made. Bill Murray, I love Bill Murray. I mean, everybody loves Bill Murray. But you watch these two movies side by side, and Bill Murray's Baloo is not nearly as interesting as Phil Harris's Baloo. I mean, Phil Harris's Baloo is just bursting with life and energy and personality. And the problem is, I don't think Bill Murray was suited to the part to do a voice acting role. He's much more suited to doing a deadpan live action comedy or something like that. So just the advantage of casting people in the animated movies who are good at doing animated characters. And just interesting that Phil Harris never really. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. But surprise. I was surprised I couldn't find more of him on YouTube showing up on talk shows and stuff like that. It just seems like such a personality in those animated movies. Okay. So I've talked about a bunch of random stuff. Oh, and there's more random stuff to talk about. The guy who plays Bagheera, was the narrator on Winnie the Pooh, and guy who does Ka, of course, is Winnie the Pooh. But of course, you don't need Wikipedia for that. You can pretty much recognize that immediately, huh? Okay, but the movie. I haven't even reviewed the movie. So, as I've been saying throughout this video, I've seen this movie I don't know how many times. This is the first time I've reviewed it on this channel because this is the first time I've seen it in its entirety since I started this Thoughts on Rewatching video project. But one of the things with movies that you've seen so many times is you compare your initial impression of them to the impression that you're making now, and you just notice things. And I guess the big thing to notice is this movie is really short. It was like an hour and 15 minutes. Just not that much over an hour. I mean, here I am rambling on and on and on about it, and it's just really this short little movie. It also seems to have a number of narrative leaps in it. I mean, Baloo meets Mowgli, and that deep attachment that they feel for each other just seems to come out of nowhere, right? I mean, watch the movie. They meet. Baloo says, "I'm going to teach this kid some stuff," and then Bagheera says, "No, he's got to go back to the Man Village." And Baloo is like, "The Man Village? They're going to ruin him. You can't do that to him." And it's like, Baloo, you just met him. Like 2 minutes ago, you just met this kid. Like, where is this deep affection coming from? I guess in movies and cartoons, you've got to make these kind of leaps. Um, Baloo, of course, is the perfect friend for any 10-year-old boy. How old is Mowgli supposed to be? About 10 years old or something. Um, Again, just bursting with personality, lavishing the attention on Mowgli. Uh, you think to yourself as a kid, you never really get an adult who's that kind and patient with you. Or if you do, watch out. I mean, I don't know, but you know, sorry, I shouldn't joke. But the point stands. Maybe if you ever do get that in real life, possibly it could not be healthy. I don't know. Sorry, these videos are unscripted, so I just say whatever comes into my mind. Apologies if I say something stupid every now and then. I also thought watching the movie though that being a teacher and kind of working with kids, uh, kids can be on good behavior for very short periods of time. But sooner or later, they're going to get annoying and start pushing buttons if they're given free range. And that's another fiction of these movies is that Mowgli stays, he's a little mischievous, but he doesn't really become very annoying. So he becomes, I guess basically what I'm saying is the obvious. That in movies, people are more friendly and amiable than they are in real life. Kids are easier to get along with. Adults are friendlier to kids, more patient with kids. Um, the interplay between Sebastian and Baloo is good. Sorry, not Sebastian. Bagheera. Sebastian was the name of the voice actor. I think that's what I'm getting mixed up with. But speaking of which, I haven't talked about this enough or at all, which is that the Bagheera voice actor is really good. You have this Black Panther who's just embodied with this really fussy personality. It just completely works, and Bagheera and Baloo play off of each other well, even if it's a bit contrived and silly at times. The ending of the movie is just perfect, where Mowgli sees the girl, and Baloo says, "Oh, forget about him, kid. They ain't nothing but trouble." And he wants to have a closer look, and Baloo says, "No, don't take a closer look." And Bagheera says, "Baloo, let him take a closer look." And Bagheera knows exactly what's going to happen, and he knows he doesn't need to do anything more at this point, but just let events take their course. And he's just smiling smugly at Baloo, and he just that scene was really perfect. Okay, if you want to nitpick it, how old exactly is Mowgli? Old enough to be interested in girls, I guess, but I kind of pictured him as around 10 throughout the movie. Sometimes I don't know. But yeah, I guess that's another thing you just have to go along with in these movies. Oh yes, the girl is singing the song about fetching the water, which is a really beautiful song. It sounds as it often does in these old Disney movies, a little bit too beautiful. This is one of those things that jars the ear a little bit when watching these old Disney movies, is you have these cartoon characters just singing in like operetta-like voices. They would not do that nowadays. They would have like a much more ordinary voice that she would be singing with. But I checked Wikipedia actually after rewatching the movie, and it was a child actor apparently doing that girl. I guess she really just did have a classically trained voice, or a voice that sounded like it, anyways. Um, Now, she and Mowgli are both Indians. I mean, the whole movie takes place in India. The movie never makes a big deal about it, but you wonder, is this I mean, is this the first Disney animated movie to have non-white characters in a prominent role like this? Well, let me think. What other Disney animated movies have there been, huh? I think so, right? Bit of a cultural milestone. I don't know. Um, but ironic in a way because this is the movie. Sorry, this is one of the movies that always gets accused of racism now. I said it. I was going to say that this is the movie, but I think there's Song of the South, Peter Pan, the Why is the Red Man Red scene, Dumbo, the Black Crows scene, and then maybe this movie is fourth down. Yeah, the I Want to Be Like You scene. Now, this is old news now, but I guess it was, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, one of the Disney heiresses, Disney's daughter or granddaughter, was kind of trashing the old man and saying, "Oh yeah, he was completely racist, and the song is completely racist. I want to be like you." It was about how black people want to be white, but they can't be white because black people are like monkeys. Not my view. That was the view that she was ascribing to somebody else. She was ascribing to Walt Disney. Now, despite being Disney's granddaughter, I don't think she had any particular insight into what he was actually thinking. This was just supposition on her part. It's one of those things where I think you can't help but wonder a little bit, but at the same time, you can't definitely say that it is. You've got to keep it open to the possibility that it's just a monkey. It's a monkey who's supposed to be representing a monkey. I think the other reason it's accused of racism, though, is because it's a white singer. It's a Italian singer who is imitating the style of a black jazz singer. Although, yeah, again, this is... I really don't want to get in too much trouble on this video. But, I mean, this is one... I don't know. I sometimes wonder if we make too big of a deal out of these things. It's just a style of a character. It's no reason why a white person couldn't do that style of character. It's just all animated anyways. I don't know. If I'm being insensitive or missing something, let me know in the comments below. I don't want to... I really don't want to be on the wrong side of this, but nothing. Moving on. I'm gonna move on before I put my foot in my mouth. But the movie on the whole is really good. Baloo and Bagheera interact really good. Shere Khan is a really good villain. That ending scene is well done. Now that ending, the fight between Mowgli and Shere Khan, I think if this movie was coming out to nowadays, it would be bigger and longer, and there would be more of a dramatic fight. But for its time, and I think largely it even still holds up. That climactic fight is fine. That dramatic music really helps. The fire coming out of nowhere because lightning struck the tree is a little bit of a cheat, but that dramatic music just doesn't give you any time to really stop and think about it. You're just like, oh man, things are happening. Okay, now there's fire. I don't think you can really tie tails in knots like Mowgli does with Shere Khan, but it's a cartoon. There's of course that fake out with Baloo's death, which is a cheap cliche, but maybe it's kind of forgivable because you figure it's a children's movie and there's lots of children who don't know this cliche to death. They don't over milk it. You find out that Baloo's not really dead in like 30 seconds of it showing that he's dead, the comedy of that is good, where Bagheera is eulogizing him for so long, and Baloo is just listening to it, saying, "Oh, I wish my mother could have heard this," and then how upset Bagheera gets when he finds out Baloo is not dead. So yeah, the characters are so charming in this. The guy who plays Bagheera, the guy who does Baloo, guy who does Shere Khan, classic. Okay, I'm gonna stop here. I mean, I don't want to ramble on for too long, he says after 45 minutes. There's more stuff I could talk about, obviously. I haven't gotten to Ka. Okay, let me deal with Ka real quick. I never really liked those scenes with Ka. I think he slows the movie down a couple times. And that song, Trust in Me, I think is a bit of an unnecessary song. It's not particularly catchy. It slows the movie down. It's forgivable, though, because it doesn't go on too long. And then that scene between Ka and Shere Khan is really good, like I said before. The elephants. Okay, I don't want to talk about the elephants too long. Other than to say, it did strike me watching it this time. There's elements of these cartoons that are just timeless and will appeal to children of any era. But then there's stuff that's dated. And the joke with the colonel of the elephants is that he rambles on for too long, or kind of will kind of talk to himself and then trail off mumbling. And there's a few characters who do this shtick to some degree or the other. Ka does it a little bit. What else? Sorry. There was another case where it came up, which I'm forgetting. But like I'm assuming maybe it played better with its target audience at the time. I certainly had no problem with watching it when I was a kid. But I think nowadays you just watch it and it's boring. Instead of having a joke about a character who rambles on, nowadays there'd just be more slapstick and action. So that kind of thing dates the movie a bit and possibly makes it unappealing to kids. I mean, I know my three-year-old's attention was definitely wandering during those parts, but I mean, to be fair, she was only half engaged during the movie. Okay, so I've talked about Ka, I've talked about the elephants. I'm just going to finish here.